The sun bore down on Calico Ridge like the eye of something cruel. Dust rose from the trampling boots of cattlemen, drifters, and scavengers, all pressing into the town square where a makeshift wooden stage stood like an altar to everything broken. At its center knelt a girl, barefoot and shackled. Her name was Elena, though none present had bothered to ask. "Hi, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what I'm going to ask you is really quick, and it will really help the channel to grow and create new stories. Just click below the video image to subscribe. You'll be doing an act of kindness and encouragement to those who are just starting out. Thank you very much, and continue with your story now." Her dress, if it could still be called that, clung to her like old smoke, torn and blood-stained. Dried, rust-colored patches smeared the fabric from her knees down. Her legs trembled under her weight. In her arms, a newborn whimpered against her chest, red-faced and too quiet for comfort. A thick iron chain looped around her right ankle, bolted to the post. Her skin was raw beneath the metal. "Step right up!" hollered the auctioneer, standing tall in his black vest, grin wide as a rattler's yawn. "A 2-for-1 special, folks! Young enough to mend and comes with a squealer to grow your legacy!" Laughter broke out among the crowd like broken glass. "She's still bleeding," someone snorted from the back. "Fresh as a spring calf," the auctioneer chuckled. "Ain't every day you get to name a babe you ain't fathered." Elena kept her gaze fixed on the planks beneath her knees. The crowd's noise blurred into the thump of her heart, her lips pressed against the infant's scalp, her only gesture of defiance. No sobs, no words, just the fierce protection of a mother's love. "Starting at 50, the auctioneer barked. 50 for the both, girl and brat, still breathing, still bleeding. Any takers? 70, someone called. 85. The price climbed like heat from the earth. With each shout, Elena's breath grew thinner. The baby stirred restlessly in her arms. 150! 200 from the man with the toothpick! Then a voice cut through the noise, calm, hard as gravel. 300! Silence slammed down over the square like a heavy door. All heads turned toward the edge of the crowd where a man stood tall and unsmiling. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but the edge of his jaw was clenched tight as a steel trap. His duster coat was faded, boots scuffed from hard miles. He looked like nothing special until you saw his eyes. Steel gray and unwavering. 300, he repeated, louder this time. The auctioneer blinked hard. "Sir, I reckon you heard wrong." "I heard just fine." "What's your intent with the merchandise?" someone shouted from the crowd. The man stepped forward, boots landing like hammers on the wooden planks. "To give her a bed, to let her sleep, that's all." "Hell of a price for charity," someone muttered. The man turned toward the heckler, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. Not drawing it, just letting it be known. "Anyone want to top it?" Silence stretched like a taut rope. "No?" His voice dropped low and dangerous. "Then shut up and ring the bell." The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously and banged the gavel. "Sold!" The man climbed the steps with measured steps. Elena didn't look up until she heard the sharp sound of his knife cutting through the chain at her ankle. It dropped with a final metallic clank that seemed to echo across the square. He extended a weathered hand toward her. She did not take it. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Sleep." The man's voice was steady as bedrock. "Then we'll talk like people." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for the lie, the trap, the cruelty she'd learned to expect. Finding none, she forced herself to her feet, the baby mewling softly against her chest. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Elena." He nodded once. "Samuel Hartwell. Most folks call me Sam." He turned toward the crowd, still staring as if trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Sam didn't care what they thought. He placed his hand lightly on Elena's back. "This way." And with the chain still warm on the planks behind her, Elena stepped down from the auction block, barefoot, blood-streaked, but no longer alone. The town watched them go. A broken girl, a mysterious stranger, and a baby walking away from a crowd that had once bought people like cattle. Not a soul followed. Not a soul dared. The road to Sam Hartwell's ranch wound through low hills dusted with cedar and limestone, quiet but not empty. Coyotes howled at twilight, and stars bled into the darkening sky before the last ridge gave way to a spread of land hemmed by sturdy fencing and long shadows. Sam didn't speak much during the ride. Elena held the baby tight against her chest, her eyes scanning every fence post, every stretch of open space. Her feet ached from walking, her legs sore from hours of kneeling on hard wood, but she never complained. Pain was familiar, expected. Kindness was not. Sam led her around the back of the main house to where a weathered cabin stood beside the stables. One room, a small stove, a cot, and a cradle that Sam had repaired that very morning with mismatched nails. "This is yours," he said simply, opening the door. Elena stepped inside slowly, as if expecting a trap. The cot had clean sheets, actually clean, not just beaten free of the worst dirt. The stove held embers still warm from recent use. A single blanket lay folded neatly on the edge of the bed. She did not speak, neither did the baby. Sam set a kettle to heat on the stove, then placed a bowl of warm oatmeal on the small table beside the cradle. "I'll be back in the morning," he said. "You need sleep. More than that, the child needs a mother who isn't watching shadows." He started toward the door, then paused. "Wait." Elena's voice was soft, almost unused. Sam turned back. She moved to the cradle, laying the baby down with infinite care. Then, without turning around, she said quietly, "If you try to touch me, I will slit your throat in your sleep." He nodded, as if she'd commented on the weather. "That's fair." Then he stepped out, closed the door gently, and left her alone with her child and her freedom. The night stretched on, colder than expected. Elena did not sleep, couldn't, wouldn't. She fed the child from the bottle Sam had left, swaddled him tighter in the clean blanket, then pulled a small knife from beneath the baby's wrappings and tucked it under her pillow, just in case. She kept listening for footsteps, for locks turning, for breathing that wasn't her own. But nothing came except the gentle sounds of night. Wind through the eaves, horses shifting in their stalls, the distant call of an owl. Just silence. Just peace. Morning broke in a soft wash of gold. The baby stirred, making small, hungry sounds. Elena sat up immediately, knife still within reach, and saw something that made her breath catch. On the edge of the cradle lay a square of white fabric, worn soft at the corners and embroidered with fine thread. Tiny bluebirds were stitched into the edges with careful precision. A handkerchief, not a threat, but a gift. She touched it with cautious fingers, as if it might disappear. When Sam knocked and entered, he carried nothing but a bottle of warm milk and a jar of mashed apples. Elena watched him like he was a dangerous animal that might turn without warning. He set the items down and nodded toward the cloth. "My mother made that when I was a boy. For my baby sister. She died that winter." Elena blinked. "Why give it to me?" Sam met her eyes directly. "Because your child deserves more than iron chains and dirt floors." She said nothing, processing this kindness she didn't understand. He reached into his coat and placed a soft bundle beside the jar. Baby clothes, small and patched but clean. "I'll be back by dusk." She stopped him again as he reached the door. "Why are you doing this?" Sam's answer came quiet and sure. "Because no one ever asked you how you wanted to live." She looked at him for a long time, the knife still tucked under her thigh, ready but no longer quite so necessary. "And what if I don't know?" she whispered. Sam gave the faintest smile. "Then I guess you start with sleep." He left again, and this time Elena watched him go through the small window. When the door clicked softly shut, she finally sat down on the cot, placed the baby near her heart, and closed her eyes. Not all the way, not yet, but enough for the darkness to feel a little less cruel. The days passed like slow-moving clouds across the Texas sky. Elena did not leave the small cabin except to fetch water from the well or hang the baby's clothes to dry on the line Sam had strung between two posts. The ranch stayed quiet, save for the rustle of horses and the distant whistle Sam made while working the corrals. She never asked questions. Sam never pushed for answers. But trust like seeds dropped in rough soil, began to take root. Every morning he brought breakfast, never more than warm bread, milk, and sometimes eggs from his hens. He set it quietly on the doorstep, with the soft knock of a man who understood that some people needed space to breathe. Sometimes he left a book with pressed flowers tucked inside the pages. Other times a blanket or a small toy whittled from wood. He never spoke more than necessary, never lingered where he wasn't wanted. The baby, whom Elena had begun calling Daniel in her mind but dared not say aloud, grew stronger each day. Elena herself began to sing again, soft lullabies under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Her voice, rusty from disuse, slowly found its melody again. Still, she never told Sam her full name. No one had ever asked for it before, not really. The townspeople still referred to her as the girl from the auction, or worse, chattel. That one, the market wench. They avoided her when Sam took her to the trading post, stared at the faded scar around her ankle where the shackle had been. Their whispers followed her like smoke, but Sam called her something different, something that made her heart skip. Miss Elena. The first time he said it, she had been drawing water from the well, the rope burning against her palms from the bucket's weight. Morning, Miss Elena. She'd frozen, the bucket swaying at the end of its rope. What did you say? She asked, cautious as always. He tilted his hat back, revealing more of his weathered face. Your name. I reckon you have one. She stared at him, then whispered with something like wonder, No one has ever said it like that? Sam shrugged. That seems wrong. And he walked off to tend his horses, leaving Elena standing by the well with tears she didn't understand running down her cheeks. 3 weeks later, just before dusk, thunder rolled across the land. But it didn't come from the sky. It came on horseback. 4 riders kicked up dust at the ranch gates, their faces familiar in the worst possible way. Elena had seen one of them at the auction, laughing when blood had soaked through the wooden platform beneath her. She was in the cabin when she heard the gate slam and voices bark across the yard. Through the window, she watched Sam step out of the barn, shotgun already in his hands, calm as a man who had seen worse things than this. Evening, one rider called, his teeth yellow in the dying light. We're here for what's ours, another added. Sam's voice carried clearly across the yard. This is private land, the lead man pointed toward the cabin. She's stolen property, a missing asset from the flesh warrant registry, took off before her paperwork cleared. She was bleeding through her clothes, Sam replied evenly. I paid for her outright. The man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Then maybe we refund you and call it even. Sam didn't laugh. He stepped forward, the shotgun held with casual competence. At this ranch, property doesn't breathe. That girl has lungs and a name. One of the others leaned forward in his saddle, hand drifting toward his belt. You making this legal trouble? I'm making it human. Silence held for a breath too long. The horses shifted restlessly, sensing the tension that crackled between the men like lightning before a storm. Then the lead man spat into the dirt and yanked his reins hard. Not worth it. He wheeled his horse around and the others followed. Dust and hoof prints faded into the coming darkness, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. Sam waited a long moment before lowering the shotgun. From behind the stable door, Elena stepped out slowly. Daniel clutched protectively in her arms. You could have gotten shot, she said, voice tight with fear she was trying to hide. Sam looked at her directly. So could you. Her arms tightened around the baby. What if they come back? Then we'll remind them what kind of man lives here. She looked down, then up again, meeting his steady gaze. Miss Elena, he added gently, if you want to be called something else, I can try. She shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. It was never the name I hated, just the way it was said. And for the first time since the auction, she said her full name aloud. Elena Rosalind. Sam nodded once, respectful as a man tipping his hat to a lady. Pleasure to meet you proper, Miss Rosalind. Though the wind still carried the scent of dust and danger, something warmer settled over the ranch that night, the fragile breath of someone beginning to believe she might actually belong somewhere. The night air had turned colder than usual for late summer. A faint wind stirred the chimes Sam had hung under the cabin's eaves, their notes soft and scattered like a broken lullaby. Inside, Elena curled tightly on the cot, one arm around Daniel, the other braced against her ribs as if holding herself together. Sleep had finally claimed her, but it brought no peace. She was back on the auction block, knees grinding against rough wood, blood soaking the earth beneath her. Her cries mixed with the howls of animals and cruel, wheezing laughter. Boots kicked near her belly. Men shouted over her head, "Not worth feeding. She's just a hole with a pulse." Hands grabbed her legs, pulled the child from her before she'd even finished screaming. Then cold, endless, bone-deep cold. She woke with a sob, clutching Daniel so tightly the baby whimpered in protest. Her nightgown stuck to her skin with sweat, and her mouth tasted of iron and dust. That was when she saw the light. Outside the cabin, through the small window, a single oil lamp flickered. Sam sat in an old wooden chair, coat draped over his shoulders, hat resting in his lap. The lamp burned low beside him, casting gentle shadows across his weathered face. Elena blinked, her voice cracking when she tried to speak. Instead, she opened the door. He looked up as it creaked. "Bad dream?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, couldn't find words for the horror that still clung to her like spider webs. Sam stood slowly, careful not to move too quickly and startle her. He picked up a tin mug from the small table beside his chair and walked toward her, his steps steady on the porch planks. "I figured you might need this." He offered the cup. Elena hesitated before taking it. The scent hit her first. Lavender, chamomile, and something earthy and warm. Not sweet, not bitter, just comforting. She cradled the cup with both hands, letting the steam rise between her fingers like incense. Sam didn't ask about the dream. Didn't try to tell her what she'd been through or offer empty words about forgetting. He just said, "No one's going to touch you again, Elena. Not while you're under this roof." She looked up slowly, eyes glassy with unshed tears. "How can you promise that?" "I don't promise," he said simply. "I just keep watch." She took a sip. The tea scalded her tongue, but it helped ground her in the present moment. Sam didn't move to go back inside. He settled again in the chair, letting comfortable silence fill the space between them. "I used to watch the stars with my brother," he said after a while. "Before he joined the Rangers, we'd count the ones we thought were meant for us, like each one was waiting to be found." Elena said nothing, but she looked up. The sky was cloudless, so crowded with stars it made the darkness feel less empty. "Which one is yours?" she whispered. Sam nodded toward a bright point of light. "That one there, next to the crooked line. Been following it since I was 13. And it hasn't led you anywhere?" "It led me here," he said softly. Elena looked at him then, truly looked. His eyes weren't soft, but they were steady. The kind of steady you could lean on if you ever dared to try. She nodded once, then stepped back inside the cabin. Sam remained on the porch, keeping his quiet vigil. That night, for the first time in years, Elena slept all the way through. No jolts, no screams, no knife clutched in her fist, only the soft rise and fall of Daniel's chest beside hers. Outside, the lamp flickered once, then steadied, its flame burning through the dark like hope itself. 6 months later, the morning sun crept slowly across the fields, casting long golden lines over fence posts and rows of corn just beginning to sprout. Elena rose before the rooster now, wrapped Daniel in a worn sling, and stepped out into the world with bare feet and quiet purpose. She no longer stayed hidden. She no longer watched life from the shadows. Her days began with milking goats and ended with fresh bread cooling on the windowsill. She knew how to mend a fence now, how to keep a fire burning through the wind. She even smiled sometimes, not at anyone in particular, but to herself, like a secret kept safe. One afternoon, after she'd tended the vegetable garden and hung fresh herbs from the porch rafters to dry, Sam returned from town to find her hoeing weeds beside the stable. "You don't have to work," he said. setting his supply sack gently on the porch steps. Elena looked up, sweat beading her brow, dirt smudging her forearms. "I don't want to sleep forever," she replied. Sam leaned against a nearby post, watching her with something new in his expression. Not pity, something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Respect. "My sister's name was Catherine," he said at last. Elena paused, the hoe still in her hands. The breeze shifted between them, quieting the world for a moment. "She was 12 when a man offered my father money to take her east. Promised schooling, a better life." Sam's jaw tightened. "I was 18. I was supposed to go after them, but I waited too long." Elena stood still, letting his words settle in the space between them. "They sent her to one of those auction towns," Sam continued. "By the time I found the place, she was already gone. No trail, no witnesses, just a necklace she used to wear, left in a drawer like trash." He didn't cry. He just stared out toward the edge of the pasture where wheat danced like golden ghosts in the wind. "I haven't spoken her name out loud in 5 years," he added softly. Elena walked forward slowly and stood beside him. She said nothing, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things neither could say and maybe didn't need to. 2 years later. The ranch looked different now, not larger or grander, but fuller. The vegetable garden stretched farther, woven between small wooden play areas and clotheslines heavy with children's garments. The barn had been painted bright red. A second cabin stood behind the main house, built from pine and even older promises. A sign hung over its door. "Rest here." Some who came stayed for days, some for months, a few for years, but all left with something they hadn't arrived with, their own name spoken with respect. Inside the main house, Elena kept a journal. She wrote by lantern light after the children had gone to sleep, the house hushed but never entirely silent, because peace didn't always mean quiet. On one yellowed page, in handwriting steadier than it used to be, she wrote, "This is a place where women sleep without fear." Sometimes she stopped writing to look out the window, watching Sam and the paddock teaching their daughter how to hold reins without fear. The little girl, Rose, they called her, giggled as Sam lifted her into the saddle, her small boots kicking the air with joy. Elena would smile, then return to her writing. It was Rose who found the scar once, running her small fingers across her mother's ankle while sitting in her lap, tracing it like a ridge on a map. "What's that, Mama?" Elena looked down. The skin was smooth now, but the mark from the iron shackle had never completely faded. She hesitated, then answered plainly, "That was a lock someone put on me." "Why?" "Because they forgot I was a person." Rose frowned. "That was silly." "Yes," Elena whispered. "It was." The girl reached up and touched her mother's cheek. "No one will lock you again." Elena kissed her small hand. "No, baby. Not ever again." One fall afternoon, a new girl arrived. No more than 17, barefoot with a bruised lip and a threadbare dress that had seen too much sorrow. Elena met her at the gate. "You here to stay or to rest?" The girl looked behind her once, then whispered, "I don't know." Elena smiled. The same smile Sam had given her so long ago. "Then stay until you do." She led her inside, gave her tea, and sat with her in the warm silence of the front room. No questions, no judgment, only warmth and the promise of safety. That night, the girls slept for 12 straight hours. Elena wrote in her journal, "We don't save them. We give them a place to remember who they are." Sam never asked to be called a hero, but folks started calling him that anyway. He'd shrug it off, saying, "I just own some land and know how to swing a hammer." But deep down, he knew better. He had built more than fences and cabins. He had helped build futures. One evening, he and Elena sat beneath the stars, watching their children run between lantern poles in the yard. Sam held her hand, his rough thumb tracing the soft skin of her palm. "You ever think about the auction?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Not like before." "How so?" "I used to hear the gavel in my sleep. Now I hear Rose laughing instead." Sam turned to her, his gray eyes reflecting starlight. "I love you, Elena." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I know." On the last page of her journal, Elena wrote, "I was once bought for less than a horse, but I was loved like a human being. And that, in the end, is the only price that ever mattered." She closed the book and set it on the shelf beside Sam's mother's Bible and Catherine's necklace, the one he'd finally been able to buy back from a pawn shop in Austin. Outside, Rose was already calling for a bedtime story, and Daniel was chasing fireflies with the other children who had found their way to the ranch. The homestead glowed with the soft gold of evening light, a beacon that waited for no one but welcomed everyone who needed shelter from the storm. In the Old West, not every hero rode in with a badge or a bullet. Some simply gave a woman a bed and let her sleep without fear. Some love stories don't start with kisses. They start with mercy. And sometimes mercy grows into something beautiful enough to change the world, one rescued soul at a time. Hello, how are you? Did you enjoy the story? Like, share, comment on which city you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to help us continue adding new amazing videos. Thank you very much, and come back often.